today. So let's give a big round of applause for Winston Perez.
Thank you so much with that introduction. It's a lot more pressure because she does always a wonderful job, so hard to follow such a great person in Dr. Jackie. So obviously our talk is about freedom to write. Let's get going, and sort of an inspirational workshop. And now we have an intimate group, so we're going to open it up to questions in a little bit, but I want to introduce our panel first. And there are 3 subjects underneath that that we'll be talking about. One is sort of freedom aspect. The second is sort of innovation. And the third is sort of a personal approach. And that's kind of, we're going to try to weave those through all of them. But first I want to introduce our panelists and kind of from a personal perspective, have them give you a sense of their path, right, to where they are today. And I'd like to start with the ladies, and Meredith, I'd like to talk about you. So everyone in this room has seen her acting, right?
Probably not everyone.
No, yeah.
What?
And
Days of Our Lives? I don't know. Oh, it is now. Wow.
Right. And the amazing thing about her acting is it's so natural. You know, you really can't tell she's acting. She's one of those actresses that you see everywhere. And so I think she began early on, Mark, as an award-winning writer, right, in childhood, storyteller. And
You want me to tell people?
well, I'm just going to give them a little bit of background.
All right.
And now she's the head CEO of Right Brain, right? And for me, it's an educational program, right, about storytelling. And she's done that. For me, she's sort of a classic American great story because she worked so hard. She had this talent. She nurtured it, right? And she developed some skills, made a lot of money, made a lot of programmings, but now she turned around, right, to help others. And she's used that to kind of create an innovative program that she can tell you about. But I kind of want to start with a multiple choice question for you, which is sort of tell us about the first job or responsibility you had as a child, or when you look back, what was your first step into writing and acting? How would you say that? How did you step into it?
Okay. Can I?
Yeah.
Can I first?
Sure.
Give them like a good little bite of who I am.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Though that was lovely, and I so
No,
appreciate it.
that's fine.
Let's see. So my name's Meredith, and what Winston was referring to. Hi all. I had a nice, long, hopefully it will continue when I'm back in the mood, career on camera, behind the camera. I'm in movies like Legally Blonde and A Night at the Roxbury. I'm in like big, stupid, fun movies, and I produced and co-starred in really good, small, little indie movies. The big, stupid ones that I'm very grateful for paid the bills. The little ones didn't, fed my spirit. I've been a storyteller my whole life. We all are storytellers. I just knew I was. And then, you know, I was the girl who, I had a very, I had a large capacity to express myself as a young person. This expression was creative. It was met with a positive response. I got some self-esteem. I believe that that's what's missing. Our students need some self-esteem, and they're learning in a construct that doesn't support a whole lot of that. We want to make creativity core, right? And then I had really good grades. I tanked my SATs. I didn't get into the only college I really wanted to go to. Didn't want to go to my safeties. And then, I don't know, film, television, life. And then somehow a beautiful idea dropped in, and then I ended up creating, not in a bubble, but for all intents and purposes, the first ever standards-aligned curricula in the art of children's book authoring. Students K through 12, we give them illustrated children's books that have no words. They write the story through a robust academic process that they do in school or after school. We align everywhere in the country if anyone cares about alignment. And then they write these books, they keep these books, and they start to feel like writers and have ownership of something they've created, but it's disguised learning because it's children's book images and content which is not threatening to them, so we're getting them to write, like Dr. Jackie said they need to. We just don't, hi Dr. Jackie. We just don't tell them, you know, this is academic and you're about to become a writer. They just do it. And after the fact, they're like, look at all that I did. So that's what I do now. I don't make any money, but I appreciate the
No,
vision
I'm
you
just-
have
yeah.
for me becoming a person who makes money again. Used to make money in Hollywood, and now I run this company, and one day,
Well, what I love about
great.
it is
That's what we
that
do.
hard work pays off, right? And that sort of dedication and passion for something, which is what you try to give to students. You know, when they find that passion for medicine, acting, whatever it is, that we have programs and opportunities to kind of leverage that, right? I was just going to ask a simple question, which is, what did your self-esteem in terms of early success do for you? How did that help you? And how do you see that?
okay.
Excuse me.
Well, as it relates to Hollywood, I was raised, the truth is I was raised by parents who had enough low self-esteem themselves. They struggled enough with their own stuff that they knew not to, like they let me discover myself, right? And so when I was an actress, auditioning or creating content, and there's so many no's, and for every 100 no's, there's a yes, right? But the no's, and this is transferable, I think, anywhere, right? The no's, even if you're an educator, the principal, the district, the no's can really beat you down. But if you know who you are, what you are, and what you have to give, I think you can be pretty resilient. Yeah, so, and when you're strong and you're smart and you're direct and you're a chick, you gotta, you can be a little more beaten down. So you have to be resilient. And sometimes your resilience threatens people, so then you're like, the stronger I get, the more threatening I become. So then start a children's education company, get a great team together so you don't have to talk to people and scare them. No, I'm kidding. So self-esteem just helps you, I think, for me, it helped me show up and not take things personally. I try to live in the world impersonally.
Very great.
Is that a good answer?
Yeah,
Winston?
perfect. Actually, you want to hear the stories because when you face those no's, then you realize other people face that too, right? And so, Rowan, I want to introduce you. You help her, right? You work on the right brain, and also you're a writer, and so you've done 2 coffee table books. Is that right? And obviously a children's book, a youth book for Disney Publishing. Right. And so tell us a little bit more about your background, but I think you're giving kids of all ages a path, right, to authentic creativity and self-expression, but I'd love to hear about how you stepped into this world.
Well, something else I do, which is a big part of that, goes along with all of this, is I teach kids in juvenile halls, and I teach creative writing to them. So obviously, that's the freedom to write part comes in. I got into this because I was passionate about writing as a kid. I wasn't a kid who was great at expressing myself verbally or in a way that took up too much space. So writing was really for me the way that was most comfortable and most authentic to express myself. So I really get a lot out of working with kids who have that trouble expressing themselves with the world and using writing as their vehicle.
Great, and that's what we want to see, right? This concept of mentorship. I think Stephen may be talking a little bit about mentorship programs. And so that ability, everyone sort of joined together, right? We're in that struggle, we face the no's, but we start to advance, and we need to turn around and help others behind us, right? Who are overcoming those obstacles as well. And so I also want to introduce now Tracy Kardash, and she's involved with PEN American, which is a program that stands with writers, novelists, essayists, journalists, poets, and playwrights, right, who face kind of persecution, right, and they do that around the world, too, and they also celebrate writers. So we have that serious element of what happens and the freedom to write, and I wanted to find out about your organization and the programs that you're doing, but for me, you're an advocacy warrior. You've been there in the front lines, right? She would also work with Amnesty International and Union Station Homeless Services and the Foundation for Camp Max Strauss, which kind of follows kids from 7 to 17 and kind of guides them. So you're seeing a little bit of a theme here is that whatever stage in life you're in, if you're already successful or if you're struggling to, we all need each other. So maybe you can tell us about PEN American.
Sure. So I have to admit I am not a writer. I am a storyteller, though, and I have always dedicated myself to using my voice to lift up the voices of others. Currently, I'm with PEN America, and as he mentioned, it's an organization that protects writers at risk. But we are actually an organization, a membership organization that sits at the intersection of words and human rights, protecting the First Amendment and the liberties that make that possible. And we do it through a number of ways. We publish original reports around fake news, news literacy, online harassment, tools for people to really understand who's behind the different media organizations, how they're funded, what ethics policies they have in place. We have 7,500 writers around the United States. We're the largest of over 100 PEN centers internationally. And we work to advocate for the freedom of writers, journalists at risk. We are currently involved in a lawsuit to protect journalists here in the United States. As many of you know, individuals like Jim Acosta and Brian Karem have lost their press passes, and we stand with them and behind them in ensuring their ability to report. We're also working internationally to free writers like Oleg Sentsov, who's a filmmaker who was recently released in Crimea, and who was on a very long hunger strike, and who will actually be visiting Los Angeles in January for any of you who would like to meet him firsthand. This gentleman almost starved himself to death to stand up for writers and artists at risk. We advocated for the release of Wallon and Chassa'ou, who were Reuters journalists released last year, and others, including the Saudi Arabian women who are on the forefront of the driver ban. In addition to that, we are in schools. We have a program for the last 29 years called PEN in the Community, and we bring professional writers into schools to work with students over a 10-week period. At the end, an anthology of their work is published, and we do a lot not to edit the students, but to allow them to find their voice and to be able to tell their own stories, stories that are often underrepresented. We do this not only in Title I schools, but we're doing it in community centers. We have a project in New York that works with Dreamers that has produced a book called Dreamers, which is available on Amazon and tells their personal stories, as well as a program called The M Word, which is working to uplift the stories of Muslims. I think I'm here today not only for our activism, but also thanks to the Hollywood Foreign Press. We're launching a new branch of our PEN in the Community program, which will be a journalism in action program, and we're going into Title I schools starting in January to teach journalism, to teach about free expression, to teach about news literacy, and to publish a newspaper with the students that uplifts the stories of their communities that are not yet heard.
Fantastic. And just in terms of your youth, what was your first inspiration that you kind of wanted to be, an advocate in some ways? Do you remember that?
Yeah, actually it started with a lot of no's. I got involved in campus fundraising at the University of Toronto for the Jewish community and heard a lot of no's from alumni. And through that was opened up to the incredible network of the Jewish Federation and how they were really supporting Jews internationally who are at risk. I got involved with the campaign Operation Exodus that worked to bring Ethiopians to Israel and help to settle them there, which was just an incredible experience to see them come off planes and buses into apartments that were set up for them to integrate into Israel, and was really just moved by the fact that we had this ability to take people out of countries where they were endangered and to make space for them wherever we could. And that just caught on. I thought that was important work. I did it for a long time in the Jewish community, and then got to a point where I felt that my reach could go much broader than the Jewish community, and that there were people all over the world who needed this kind of assistance. That brought me into homeless services right in my own community of Pasadena, but eventually to Amnesty International, where I raised money within the northwest part of the country, doing major gift fundraising to really help save people all over the world. And I think coming to Penn most recently, a year and a half ago, we do an honorary dinner every year, and recently, honored Ava DuVernay and others in Beverly Hills. But last year, I had the great honor of recognizing and honoring the work of Ai Weiwei, who I had advocated on behalf of at Amnesty for his release from house arrest, and then had the opportunity to present him with an award here at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, thanking him for all the incredible artwork that he's put out into the world to tell the stories of refugees and others who are at risk. So these things come full circle. They may take years, but advocacy works, and I hope that all of you engage in some kind of advocacy, whether it's for people within your own schools or out in the broader community or even around the world.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. And now I'm going to turn to Michael Song, because he is in another world of creating a kind of world for creatives to have a platform to kind of present their creative work. And I'd love for you to kind of explain that. And
so I'm editor-in-chief of a company called Tapas Media. We're an open platform for creators to publish webcomics and web novels. My editorial goals are to tell stories that you just can't find anywhere else. And the only way to do that is to diversify who the creators are to better represent the world at large. So we're home to over, I'm going to get this number wrong, but 50,000 creators, I believe, last time I checked. It might be more now. We publish over 70,000 original stories. And we try to work with first-time writers, professional writers, or even hobbyists. Anyone who wants to get their voice out, we try to support them with the open publishing platform.
Great. And then I want to introduce Stephen Galloway. So in 5 words, he's perhaps the top entertainment journalist almost in the world, and 5 things I could say about him is he is an Emmy award-winning journalist. He is executive editor of The Hollywood Reporter. He's created the THR's Roundtable, which are interviews you can see on Sundance Channel. He's also created Hollywood Masters, which you can kind of see on Netflix, which is another interview series. And the people who he's interviewed are from Spielberg to Oprah, she mentioned, and all the people that I could go on for forever on that. But I think so many people have seen his work, and I think everyone here should watch those tapes. The thing he brings to the table that I notice is a great passion for your work. You create an incredible environment that's fun to work with. And so I think, part of our work in the future in entertainment is inspiring others through our own passion. So maybe you can explain a little bit about your background in terms of where did you start with the passion?
I started, funnily enough, as an actor. And I was a teenager, and I was doing okay in school. And the principal of the school said, and I loved acting, and he said, I'll always let you have time off if your grades don't get any worse. They weren't that terrible, but And so I thought, this year I'd better do some homework. And suddenly, I was first in a few subjects, and then, of course, you want to stay there. And it was a great lesson, because if you can find somebody's passion, they will then motivate themselves. Yes. And I recently went into a high school, and as I mentioned, when some of you here, the Hollywood Reporter has 2 mentorship programs for teenagers. One is for girls, it's called the Women in Entertainment Mentorship Program. The other, which is a year old, is called the Young Executives Fellowship. We went into a school, and I mentioned this, and a boy there asked me, how do I find my passion? And I thought about this question for weeks because I couldn't answer it. And by the time I could answer it, it was too late to benefit him. But one way is to find what you're good at and then concentrate on that and become better at that. And I happen to be fairly good at writing. And over the years, I'm still working to get better. You never get where you want to get. But that is where I started, and I went to film school here and then drifted into journalism.
Great. I'll give you a little bit of my background just to give you a sense of this. Actually, my high school principal allowed me to skip school. And suddenly you think, for me, that's the definition of wisdom in education, because I came to him with an idea for a newspaper for teenagers. So he gave me 2 rules. One is I had to take a classmate, and the second is I couldn't leave classes during when I had tests. Right? I didn't know till a few years ago that people thought that was so cool, and it makes sense. Oh man, you get to skip classes. I had to go out to all the principals in the area and kind of talk to them and encourage them to let their students come to our class. And one of them was sort of my high school girlfriend, so she loved it that I could take her out of chemistry class, right? So that blew into sort of a more journalistic approach for a newspaper that went to all private and public schools in the DC area. And it was 14 years later after that I made a discovery, is what I call concept modeling. And that's really based on the difference between an idea and a concept. So all of you, we all know what ideas are the same way we know what air is, right? For all history, we've kind of known, that's something that you breathe. Even cavemen knew that if you don't have air, you die, right? But structurally, it was Priestley in 1774 discovered air had oxygen in it. So everyone uses their intuition, their gut instinct to deconstruct stories. What I do is concept model the essence underneath them by separating idea from concept. So dictionary definition of idea is a thought or concept. Dictionary definition of a concept is an idea or a conception. So think about that. Automobile, that's what they're telling you. But the essence of it, when we can separate those two, we can actually create things that have more depth. And all the talent up here, they use their intuition, right, and their knowledge of story structure to kind of break that out. And the last thing I say is, when you study marketing in college, you study marketing concepts. Finance concepts. Law, legal concepts. Even story, you learn about story structure, character arcs, and all those things. And I say, why not study concept itself? We know more about the Big Bang and quantum physics than we kind of do about the nature of the abstract world and the nature of concepts. So that's what I do, and it's kind of relates to this because part of journalism, right, is inspiring students through the stories. Part of acting is bringing new innovation, the work that you're doing, Meredith, right? Innovation and a storytelling technique, not just to tell the story, but to inspire students. I think one of the common themes are when you find your passion, right, then you're able to drive things. But all this happens in a world where freedom to write is kind of challenged these days, right? And I want to put that in historical context for a second. If you think about it, the Constitution was created in 1788. It was ratified. New Hampshire was the key to that. And it wasn't until 3 years later that the Bill of Rights was created. And I wanted to say that Thomas Jefferson said this about the Bill of Rights. A Bill of Rights is what people are entitled to against every government on earth. So I want to talk about it conceptually. The Constitution was to create a government, and suddenly there was a document called the Bill of Rights to kind of protect us individually and states from the government. So you always had this challenge between creative freedom, right, and the challenge of people trying to suppress it. So that's why your work in PEN America is so important. So I wanted to sort of get your perspective, anyone, on the challenges you face with sort of First Amendment rights in terms of what you're able to express. Especially in education, there are limits. So would anybody like to open that?
Well, I work with incarcerated students, so they're writing creatively, but there are limits on what they can write about. And it's an interesting challenge because a lot of them, their whole lives are gangs, right? This is LA, so they're in prison because they've been involved in gang activity, and they're also not allowed to write. Like, I can let them write what they want, they can curse, but they cannot write about gang life because we don't want to propagate that, I am not part of the decision making. So it's an interesting balance trying to encourage them to speak their minds and speak about their true experiences while also, narrowing that somewhat because, I'm not here to say whether it's right or wrong, but we don't want to give them a platform to brag about gangs so that they'll argue about it.
Right. That's a challenge, right, in storytelling because you have to have drama. right? Something sort of negative has to happen in a lot of ways, right? That's the origin of stories, is the fact that something bad has to happen for a story to begin. So that's almost part of story structure. So trying to stay away from the super negative or trying to glorify it, right, is a challenge. And I was going to ask Meredith, yeah.
Can
please.
I just want to, if I can,
Yes,
speak to some
always.
things a few people have said for
Yes,
just a moment, because
always.
I think it's almost over, Dr. Jackie. These ain't long enough, girl.
We're good.
Okay,
Yes.
so let me just say a couple things, if I might. First, I would argue that it isn't always something bad that has to happen to make a story great. It just, there's drama,
Right.
and it can be cheap drama, it can be negative, or it can just be meaningful,
Right.
I think. Also, you were talking about the boy who asked you, how do I find my passion? I just want to say, how many of you are educators in the room? Yeah. I mean, we're raising a generation of young people who I think are becoming less and less able, not by their own fault, but just it's the way it is, less able to identify their intuition, to process their own feelings, to track and notice the emotional arcs and experiences and passions of other people. They're face down in a device of some kind 24/7. We all know it. I don't know what I would do without mine. But we are all, well, some of us are old enough to have lived long enough without that constant. Right. So I think, I know for me, I know for you because I know you, I would imagine for you from your story, certainly you from your story, you were so concise. We appreciate you. Amazing. Not Jewish, the Jew not on the panel. Not the Jew. Is you go all in, like you're all in on whatever inspires you for a second, right? If it inspires you for a moment, go all in, and then you'll know. Get out, right? Kids today, it seems every experience they have, every thought they have, every idea, every experience, it's short, it's gig experienced, and it's short form released in social media, and everything is bite-sized. And I think that there's this false sense of being connected to the world because of YouTube, because of social media. There's like a false sense of connectedness, and I think, personally, that their worldview is sort of, if you can imagine, look at this room, right? This is a big, expansive room. A cell phone's this big. So their worldview is sort of shrinking with the size of the actual devices, right? I mean, I'm being metaphoric, but it's kind of scary literal. And if these kids don't start to learn how to slow their brains down so they're not so fast processy distracted, which is what's making them depressed, which is why they've all, you know, if you're in schools, they got a learning disability, someone slaps, if they were diagnosing young people like they are now when I was a kid, I'm sure I'd have had it all, right? They'd have called me this and that, I'd have had a specialist, an EIP, when the truth is, I was just creative, and I was constantly receiving. I was in touch with my I knew what I intuited, what felt good. I went for it. Kids today, I just think educators, parents, we have to help them slow it down so they can feel who they are. If they can feel who they are, they can maybe connect to something. If they can connect to something or someone, be of service, whether they're paid or not. I think that's how you find your purpose. And without it, you're depressed. And if you're depressed, someone's going to call you depressed, and you're going to get a drug, or you're going to get a personal.
So with the information age, right, there's
I
so
wanna
much
say that.
stimulus with your phone, right, that they're kind of getting addicted to it. So I think this is where writing can make a big difference, because it's a quiet endeavor, right, stepping away and kind of going deep into a subject, right, and kind of.
Also in schools, and you know this, if you're a teacher in the classroom, you are required. And the kids are required. It's expository, it's informational, it is not creative, it's sometimes narrative, but the creative stuff is actually what would connect them more to the expository and the informational. So now you're teaching them all this stuff that's in that core curricula you're handed, right? And for parents, you should know your teachers are not inspired by it, so the kids aren't. And there's if you're lucky, you get a great teacher who knows and slips through and gets you to do some stuff that's a little more inspiring than what's on the test.
Right.
you know, blah, blah.
And with Stephen, when you do these interviews, right, I think you're conscious of the fact that artists themselves can be inspirational, right, to students and kind of help them find their passion through some of these movies. And remember, some of these movies are about journalism, some have been about, you know, firefighters, all these different things. And I think that's an inspiring, you know, subject matter that some of your great interviews have been around people who inspire others. And I was wondering if you could speak to that.
I'm not really sure what the question is, but just going back to what you were saying, I think one of the things that's interesting with young people, especially kids who come from poorer environments, is because they don't have a lot of success, they haven't been used to the rewards that allow them to aim long term. And so, you know, all these little dopamine hits like the phone are making them feel good. They're immediate responses. And I think one of the challenges is to actually give them enough faith in their success to then think long and big. And that's hard for all of us. You know, if you've never sold a screenplay and you embark on writing a screenplay, it's very difficult. If you, as I'm doing, working on books, a book is 4 years of your life. Right. And you go into it, and any long-term project is like a marriage. You have ups. I've never been married, but I think you have ups, you have downs. You get the points where you hate, you know, your partner, the book. You hate yourself. You lose belief. It's very hard if you haven't had some success to think like that. One of the things we find with the kids we take for our program is trying to say to them, most of them are just entering their junior year, you must commit everything to this year, because in 2 years' time you will be entering university. 2 years for them is an eternity.
Right.
So I don't know how you as educators change that, but the only path I see that is trying to give them some sense of success and then lengthening the carrot from the effort.
Right.
Lengthening the carrot. Also, can I say, success is not, and I know you didn't mean this, it's not defined by I go to college. Like, not all of the kids you serve will go to college and they get to like themselves and they get to know their value and they get to be big contributors in the world without necessarily a college education. I think that's super important because there's so much college and career focus, and that is an instant way to feel terrible about yourself as a high schooler, is to know that that's probably not your path, but everyone thinks it should be, and I think that your worth should be.
Yeah, and I think if you hear stories of just regular people, also famous people, they find that thing that they love to do, but they're also the pride in terms of their work, right? So one of my high school friends, he actually ended up as a carpenter, but he had such pride, right, in terms of his work, and he built a family off of that. So everyone has their own path. It's trying to find that passion for it. And Michael, I was going to ask you, you create a space for creatives, right? And so I was wondering, how does that help their self-esteem and gives them opportunity to have feedback? So maybe talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been an editor and overseeing the platform for about 8 years now. I started when we had 4 artists. We now have over 50,000. So as much as I have knowledge to impart on them, I think I learn more from these younger writers every single day. I think if you were to map out the trajectory of Tapas and all the stories that we tell and divide it between like good emotions and bad emotions within the stories, you'll see that over the course of Tapas, it strays really into the direction of good emotions. And I think these storytellers, especially younger storytellers, are deeply empathetic. I think they're actually very well connected to one another, and they're very responsive to each other's emotions. I think we've stewarded a really interesting group of creators where majority of them are under the age of 24. And we're looking at stories that they're, how do I put this? I'm a huge pop culture junkie. I love pop culture, but growing up, I always felt like I wasn't really well represented in pop culture. So I think when I look at Tapas and all the creators right now, I see people that want to interject their voice within the popular culture. And I think for the most part, yeah, they're deeply empathetic, and they're creating stories that they want to connect with each other, and I think it's really beautiful.
Right.
Yeah.
I think if you think of the word freedom, it's related to friends. I don't know if you know that, but it's this concept of friends, we belong, right? And so freedom is about belonging to a group, to a society that is free. Liberty has the connotation of individual freedoms. But when you have these groups where there are freedom, right, to kind of express themselves, it strengthens the whole group, right? And it brings them together to be able to support each other and learn from each other. And I think that's what's happening, and that's what the digital age allows you to do. And I think,
Also, if I can say, like,
Yeah.
these kids are very blessed. I was this kid, she was this kid, I'm sure you all were, to identify, to know as a young person, I am a creative. I am an artist, or I am a writer. To know you're a creative, that's freedom. So the kids in the kids under 24, right? I'm 50 in March, so they're all kids. That they know to come, that they found you, that they know that that's their calling, that's passion, that's purpose.
Right.
They're good to go. Whether they have success as it's defined, like you work with people kids who found their way to you because they know who they are. So I just want to say I was speaking to, and I was that kid, but I'm speaking to the kids we serve who may or may not know that, and if they do know that, does the school structure, does the system, because this is an education and entertainment, right? Does it allow for them to find their way to him? Do you know what I mean? And do you have time with the 40 students in your class to help that kid find his way to him? Do you know what I mean?
right.
Can you become him for them?
Right.
Yeah.
And remember that when we're doing creative things, it may not be where you end up totally, but you can apply it to everything, right? A database manager that I did a concept model on, he said it's the most creative discipline I've ever seen. And that's fascinating because you kind of have to take the data and be creative about what the essence is, right? So you can re-communicate it in a way that people understand, right? And so I kind of wanted to throw it out to some questions if people have questions.
And by the way, ask us whatever you want this help, because I'm actually not too sure what the theme of this panel is.
Yeah.
So any way that we can
We're
help
figuring
you.
it out.
Right.
We just want to say fun stuff
Yes.
to inspire you. We don't know.
I know you.
First of all, thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Jackie.
Dr. Jackie!
Right.
Agriculture. Also brought in some friends who were in the entertainment business.
Right.
And summer school, Centinela Valley, they have a county. So I would logistically bring in the right speakers. For that.
Fantastic.
Students really love this.
Yes.
So if we could do more of that.
Right.
Schools that have students with barriers.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Some folks that came in from Nassau, African American females at Nassau, high levels. They
Right.
talk to the engineering students in
Right.
middle school, so they have to start studying engineering actually in middle school, and that's how they stay interested.
Right.
They start down here.
Right.
And we can offer more and more programs.
Right.
So that's
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's so much inspiration that
Yes,
comes
go
from
ahead.
ordinary jobs. Yes.
Jump in.
No one can hear you, and it's important what
Here,
you
borrow
have
a
to
mic.
say.
Here you go.
Here.
Take this microphone. Here you go. Take this. Take this.
No, the importance of self-esteem, confidence, and the freedom to be able to write, especially when you're young and everything like that. How do you get around the catch-22 that we're now at a time when you do put writing out there that you're so vulnerable to these attacks that are happening and everything like that, that actually will take away your self-confidence and put yourself in fear? I love the idea of the journalism because you're actually focusing outside of yourself, which works as a segue. But how would you work around that issue? Thank you.
Well, I'll answer it because I've been attacked and am attacked. And one way around it, unfortunately, is you don't do massive social media, and they have to understand that. The second is to educate those kids that social media is designed for being attacked, that people come out no matter what you've done and attack you. So I try actually not to look at it. One sad thing we have at The Hollywood Reporter is we removed our comments sections because the biggest stories often are ones that, do you all know who Drudge is, Matt Drudge? Yeah. Matt Drudge is a conservative web page editor who links to other stories of interest to his absolutely massive audience. So every time we run something that might appeal to someone with a conservative point of view, he will link to it, and then we get an enormous readership. This can be something as simple as the stories I wrote a few weeks ago about the debt problem facing major companies in Hollywood. So Matt Drudge, whom I know a tiny bit and like, linked to it because it makes Hollywood not look great. They're all in debt. Right, and then you
paying
get
actors too much.
You will get literally 600 comments that devolve into racism, sexism, homophobia. You know, I'm usually some commie-loving, F whatever, That's on one extreme level. Another one, if I do the roundtables or whatever, people. I remember reading one guy saying, "I'd like to pee on his leg." So,
Wow.
who is this? So if they know this is simply part of what goes with the territory and don't look at it, they'll actually be better off. There is a second thing, which is legitimate criticism. And it's good to teach them that this is, by the way, I've taught writing, and I remember many, many years ago somebody gave me a great piece of advice, which is about relationships, going back to writing being like marriages. For every bad thing you say, you actually have to say 9 good things. So you will say, by the way, we went into a school to interview kids the other day, and one of the counselors complained about the person from Big Brothers Big Sisters and I, how we'd done an interview. We'd said to this girl, "You're great. You're going to go to a great university. Your GPA is fantastic. We love you. You have a wonderful personality. You wrote your application essay so well. Would it be a good idea if you just cut back on the cheerleading?" So she went to him afterwards, because she loved cheerleading, and had only taken, he claimed, had only taken this. But when you impart that criticism, better tell yourself, say 9 good things. That's great. And I know I'm very used to editors slashing my work. And, you get their critique, and if they have not said to you, "This is actually the greatest thing since the King James Version of the Bible." Hey, they didn't like my work. So I would say, keep off social media, number 1. Number 2, recognize it for what it is. Right. And number 3, constructive criticism is good, but when you're delivering it, deliver it with a lot of love.
And just quickly, I'll point you all again to PEN America's website, pen.org. If you look for online harassment manual, it's a wonderful tool that is available to all of you that will give you ways to really unpackage online harassment, how it's happening, what is happening, how to build allies online. So I highly encourage you to take a look. We've been doing training in newsrooms and at the Annenberg School, LA Times and elsewhere on it, but the tool is available publicly online.
Great. Thank you so much. Just to wrap it up, all about it, it's freedom, right? And we all belong together, right? And that's kind of encouraging, right? And be positive. I think that's the other message, So whenever there's something negative, remember there are 9 things behind it that are positive. So we can use that to inspire people to bring the rest up. And so I'll leave it to Jackie if you'd like to polish this up. But thank you.
Hey, Dr. Jackie. We're gonna stand, Rona and I, at the back door. We brought something for each of you. I think we have just enough for maybe who's here. So
it
as you
edible?
leave, is everyone leaving? If
No,
not, we'll
they
just,
can't
okay,
go
so we're just
anywhere.
gonna come drop some stuff. We're just gonna leave you a really fun little thing in front of you. And
Well, let's give this panel again another big round of applause. Were they not great? And it's just not.